White text over video of past events. Logo, Chicago Cultural Accessibility Consortium. Professional Development Series presents Open Book Conversation with Rahnee Patrick and Grace Tsao. At top, 2 speakers, below an ASL interpreter signs.
Hello, and welcome to an open book conversation presented by CCAC. My name is Claire Killey, and I am one of the co-chairs here at CCAC. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a white woman with long, dark brown hair. Today I'm wearing a beige turtleneck sweater with a gold necklace, and behind me is a blurred background of my office space. I'm joined today by my fellow co-chair, Hillary Pearson, and we'd like to thank you for joining us today to raise funds for CCAC and hear a wonderful conversation. We're thrilled to be hosting today's book talk with our featured guests, Rahnee Patrick, Grace Tsao, and Noah Fields. For those of you not familiar with CCAC, our mission is to empower Chicago's cultural spaces to become more accessible to visitors with disabilities. There are 4 primary pillars central to our work, and those include free professional development workshops, an accessible equipment loan program, an accessible event calendar, as well as community building across the local region and beyond.
Thanks, Claire. Hi, everyone. My name is Hillary Pearson, and I am also a co-chair of CCAC. My pronouns are she, her. I am a white 30-somethings woman wearing glasses and a headset with my hair in a ponytail and a green and pink floral shirt, sitting in front of a very ornate ceiling here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So for today, accessibility, as always, is a priority for us, and our program includes real-time captioning provided by Dylan Reporting, as well as ASL interpretation provided by Pro Bono ASL. If you'd like to view captions in a separate browser, you can do so using the stream text link included in the chat. We also have Q&A feature enabled today, and we encourage all to utilize this to submit questions throughout the program. If you have any issues with accessibility, don't hesitate to reach out to our support team through the chat. And now we'd like to welcome the founder and president of CCAC, Christina Gunther, for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Hillary and Claire. Welcome, everyone. It's so good to virtually be together. My name is Christina Gunther, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a white woman in my 30s. I have red glasses on, dark hair that's down, and behind me is a plant and a window. I really want to thank you all so much for attending today. Supporters like you help keep CCAC programs free and give many people access to our resources. Our featured conversation today is just one example of the type of programming CCAC is committed to, engaging and informative content that centers the disability community and empowers cultural institutions to be inclusive of people with disabilities. As we begin, we want to acknowledge our funders: the Gaylord and Dorothy Donnelly Foundation, the PERT Foundation, the MacArthur Funds for Culture, Equity, and the Arts at the Richard H. Driehaus Foundation, the Michael and Mona Heath Fund, City Arts Grant from the City of Chicago Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events, with funds provided by the National Endowment for the Arts as part of the American Rescue Plan, as well as a grant from the Illinois Arts Council Agency through federal funds provided by the National Endowment for the Arts, and individual donations from supporters like you. As a primarily volunteer-run organization, there are so many people who have and continue to dedicate passion, knowledge, and time to CCAC. This includes our past and current steering committee members, co-chairs, founding co-chairs, and board members. It truly takes a village. I want to acknowledge everyone's dedication and commitment. We're sharing a full list of past and current members via the link in the chat. Later in the program, we're excited to share more about CCAC's impact and how the funds we raise make everything possible. Your support contributes to our organizational progress towards key strategic goals we've identified, which include incorporating Illinois Cultural Accessibility Network, a statewide consortium initiated by CCAC, prioritizing diversity, equity, access, and inclusion across all aspects of our organization, internally and externally, establishing CCAC as a leading source of expertise in the field of cultural access, and continuing to refine and expand our professional development programs, equipment loan program, and access calendar. Today's program and your ongoing support will enable us to move into the new year with new energy and commitment to our mission to make cultural spaces places for everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christina. This is Claire Killey speaking again. At this time, I'm thrilled to invite our featured guests, Noah, Grace, and Rahnee, to join me on screen. You can find the full bios for each of our featured guests today in a document that will be available in the chat now. I'd first like to welcome Noah Fields, who will moderate today's conversation. Noah is the Events and Accessibility Coordinator at the Poetry Foundation. Welcome, Noah. Please share your pronouns and a brief image description.
Hi, my name is Noah Fields. I use she or they pronouns. I'm a white trans woman with brown curly hair. And as a brief visual description, I'm wearing a blue mock turtleneck with a black t-shirt over it and a silver necklace.
Thank you, Noah. Thanks for being here. Next, I'd like to welcome Grace Tsao, activist, writer, and educator. Welcome, Grace. Please share your pronouns and a brief image description.
Hi, everyone. I'm Grace Tsao. I'm an East Asian American woman with shoulder-length dark hair, wearing a red top with rhinestones and heart cutouts, and round wooden earrings with yellow hand-painted cats. My background is blurred, and my pronouns are she, her.
Thank you for being here, Grace. And finally, please welcome Rahnee Patrick, Director of Rehabilitation Services, a division of the Illinois Department of Human Services. Rahnee is the first Asian American and disabled person to hold this position. Welcome, Rahnee. Please share your pronouns and a brief image description.
Hi, my pronouns are she and they, and I have dark curly hair. I wear glasses, and I'm wearing a red suit jacket with a gold button. I am in an office in the West Loop of Chicago. And I've got light-skinned Asian-looking person.
Thank you, Rahnee. Thanks for being here. Thank you all so much for joining us to discuss Alice Wong's book, Year of the Tiger. I'll now hand it over to Noah to set the stage with a bit of background on the book and then lead us into conversation. So just a quick reminder that during this discussion, we're going to encourage the audience here to utilize the live Q&A feature, so you can submit any questions that you'd like us to address later in the program. I'm personally very excited to hear all of your perspectives. So Noah, you have the floor, and thank you all.
Thank you so much, Claire, and to the CCAC for having us all. I am so excited for our conversation today about Year of the Tiger, which is such an incredible book, and I really loved reading it, and I'm so excited to talk about it. Yeah, for those of you who are unfamiliar or want to learn more context, Alice Wong's memoir, Year of the Tiger, offers a portrait of the author's journey to disability justice activism. And the format's really interesting. It's like a scrapbook. It weaves together short writings from across her entire life of all genres, including personal essays, speculative creative writing, and poems and recipes. There's Twitter threads and cartoons. There's op-eds and letters to politicians, blog posts and speeches. And along with narrating meaningful episodes of her life, from attending Chinese school in the Midwest to dropping out of university and moving west to San Francisco, from meeting President Obama as a robot, to learning how to make podcasts and launching the Disability Visibility Project, Alice Wong also emphasizes her collaborative relationships with her family and community through interviews and conversations. Along the way, she dispenses vital activist wisdom and funny cat memes alike, and dips into sci-fi mutant cyborg pride. These varied reflections demonstrate the breadth of forms and genres of quip knowledge and quip writing, and they're organized in the book into a series of sections with thematic arcs: origins, activism, access, culture, storytelling, pandemic, and future. Alice Wong is first and foremost a storyteller, and Year of the Tiger attests to the power of storytelling as an activist tool and the necessity of disabled cultural and political representation. With that background, I would love to start the conversation now with Rahnee and Grace. And my first question to the floor is, as activists, can you share a little bit more about yourself and perhaps how Alice's work in general has been connected to your own personal journey?
Should I start? Okay, I'll answer that first. First of all, I want to say how much I loved this book. It really has a little bit of everything. You'll want to laugh, cry, and scream. I'm so happy to be here and honored to be a part of this event. Both Rahnee and Alice were amazing activists who I greatly admire and look up to. I never really think of myself as an activist. It's just always the way I live my life. I'm the one that always challenges and educates family and friends about ableism, racism, transphobia, homophobia, and so many other things. And I'm the one that gets into political debates with them. I've also advocate for and help my family and friends. At a young age, I realized that all oppression is linked and issues concerning marginalized people are interconnected. I know how it feels to experience prejudice, discrimination, and repression. So I feel great empathy for people, like what most disabled people, including Alice, say, that they become activists or advocates out of sheer necessity. In her introduction, Alice says, "Did I dream of becoming an activist? No, but it's probably what I'm most known for. Ableism conscripted me into activism. Other people have the luxury to opt in and out of activism, like earning extra credit for a project, but not me. What I've learned about creating change is staying true to myself from childhood up to now is yours for the taking. Getting your needs met, being part of a community, stirring up shit, and sharing information. These are examples of my activism, and there are many ways to be an activist, whether you use the word to describe yourself or not." What she says resonates so much with me. I think most disabled people are constantly fighting to have their needs met every day just in order to survive, myself included. So they don't have the luxury of not being an activist. Issues of race and disability have always been central to my life, and I've been involved with these issues through volunteering, school, work, organizations, and service on advisory committees, boards. Throughout my life, I didn't get involved at the grassroots level through protests or rallies and contacting politicians until Trump became president in 2017. And so many of the rights were on the line, as they have always been, but it just felt more urgent. And as a person who's multiply marginalized, whose friends and families are too, I felt I needed to do more. There was just too much at stake. I had just been exposed to Alice's work over a year before, so this also lit a fire in me. Alice has really inspired me to do more in recent years beyond anyone else. I don't think she even knows this. When I discovered her work, I wondered, who is this badass Alice Wong, who's unapologetically herself and full of self-love, someone whose background was similar to mine, except that I've always grappled with confidence myself, never thinking that I'm enough. I was bullied insensibly growing up because of my disability, and because of this, I've lived with extreme anxiety. That has affected my life greatly. I've had a horrible fear of public speaking my whole life. I've always been self-conscious about how I speak and how I look. Ironically, because of the pandemic, it's helped me come out of my shell a bit. This disability community has always been advocating for more access to virtual things like remote work, telehealth, access to meetings or events online, but it wasn't until the rest of society needed it that it's been realized, and I hope it continues. But Zoom and other video conferencing have allowed me to express myself in ways I never could in person. It allows me to participate in events like this without extreme anxiety, although I still have some, or wondering if I can do something if I don't have help, transportations, or days I have chronic pain, which is often. I think that seeing Alice do most of our advocacy work from home and in the virtual world and doing it so well allows me to see what's possible. If I hadn't had all these recent experiences speaking on Zoom, I would never have had the confidence to be a leader and do something like becoming chair of the statewide Independent Living Council of Illinois. The nerves and anxiety are always there if I'm doing a better job at managing it. People have often told me that I should do more writing or start a blog. My other medium is writing, although I've been years of writer's block, and I don't do it as often as I should. But I'm currently working on a piece about Asian American families and disability activism, and an editor of the collection read my piece that was republished on Alice's Disability Visibility Project blog, and she contacted me to be a part of it and write a chapter. So I owe this to Alice for getting this opportunity and also for giving voice to disabled people like me.
Wow. So this is Rahnee, and Grace, you really encapsulated so much of, a similar experience that I had with, reading the, Alice's work, and I connect with you very personally around, being very self-conscious about appearance because of there's like this high level of judgment that I feel because many people throughout the time that I, being Asian descent, having Asian ancestors, being Asian myself, having curly hair, even dark curly hair, and being non-Christian, and then getting psoriasis, where my skin was fully inflamed with red, just red, very pulsing red appearance, with big pieces of skin coming off of me and leaving like shadows of me, forensic evidence of my existence. There was definitely a sense of being highly aware, and that people felt comfortable making comments about my body straight to my face, strangers or less than strangers, but then also, off to the side, or just how I was, simply treated. And so, my activism started out more about just sort of like inequity or people being, being treated unfairly. So if there were new students that came to school as a young person, or women or girls or teenagers were being treated, my friends were being bullied or sexually harassed, even like in kindergarten or second grade, I was like upset about it and I would be mad. And I think I identified more around sexism very early on. And in fact, I studied women's studies. But then when I went to college to study women's studies and English, then I got connected very similar to Alice, like with other people who were writing and expressing about the inequity that disabled people experience. So I'd had my disability for like 10 years, and I was on programs. I went to Social Security Administration and applied for for Social Security and Medicaid after, college, but I never identified in the way until I connected up with like writers. And so Alice is like 1 year younger than me. So she was born in 73. I'm an ox. She's a tiger. And so going to school, I started in 92 in college, and there were like zines that were printed. One was called the Disability Rag, and then another one was later, my senior year in college, 96 was when Mouth magazine came out. And so these were like underground newsprint style magazines that disabled people put together. And then they wrote about, and they were written by disabled people. And that's how I got connected up with that. And then my disability services coordinator connected me up with a guy who was a student but then came back to work there. And he then introduced me to ADAPT, which is this national civil disobedience organization run by disabled people, all volunteer. And then I just kind of like went from there. And so like my activism was definitely connected to trying to use street theater and civil disobedience as a way to express the need for more home and community-based services for people with disabilities. Since about 95 or so, 94, 95 is when I started to get involved with ADAPT.
Thank you so much, Grace and Rahnee, for sharing a little bit more about how you came into activism within your personal life. But what you both said was super relatable about the sort of almost accidental way of almost stumbling into activism because you have to advocate for yourself and the people around you. I'm so curious, you're already speaking on it, but I want to hear about what's sticking with you from the book. Were there any particular sections or a piece in the book that resonated with you the most?
I think for me, it was the storytelling section, especially the letter to Asian American disabled women and girls. That resonated with me so much. I'm going to read an excerpt from this. Hello. Hey there, I got your email, letter, tweet, or direct message. Or maybe I met you in an online event or in a party pre-pandemic. Or maybe I met your mom one time I was shopping and she stopped me and cried, telling me how amazing it was to see someone like you in public but older. Or maybe it was a friend of a friend who connected us because we both happen to be Asian American and disabled. We are not a monolith, and yet people presume we automatically have a lot in common. Either way, here I am replying to you. Thank you for sharing your story with me, your questions, your requests for mentorship. First of all, I see and I hear you. I hope things will be better in this 21st century, but it's clear that disabled people of color, especially Asian American women and girls, still feel disconnected and alone. I did not set out to become a storyteller or activist, but it emerged organically, and I struggled to find myself and my people. I hope my story and work will help you imagine other paths, but please remember I'm just one example. There is a lot of work ahead, and collectively, we can succeed in our own ways. So I was one of these disabled Asian American women who contacted Alice after reading her article, First Person Political Musings from an Angry Asian American Disabled Girl in Amerasian Journal, which is also, this article is also published in her book, Year of the Tiger. And it was actually Rahnee that posted this article on her Facebook page 6 or 7 years ago. So I first connected to Alice because of Rahnee. I read it and I was just like, yes, yes, yes. Her piece resonated so much with me as a Chinese American girl with neuromuscular disability growing up in the Midwest. She often talks about people like us being unicorns, and it shouldn't have to be that way. Growing up, I had virtually no role models that looked like me. And I only knew 2 Asian American disabled girls growing up, that they were both younger than me. My brother has the same disability as me, but his progressed later in life, and being disabled was not central to his identity growing up. So his experiences were very different than mine. After I read this article, I wondered, who is Alice Wong? And I just had to reach out to her and let her know how important her words and experience were to me. She was so gracious to respond, and I'm sure she gets so many emails like these. I emailed her a piece I wrote years ago about growing up Asian American with a disability to share with her my experiences, and she ended up publishing it on her Disability Project blog. And I received so much positive feedback from this. And through the years, Alice and I have corresponded through email, social media, and through the magic of technology. We have hung out through video chats numerous times, sometimes with other disabled Asian American women, one time with Rahnee. It's always so much fun. Her story is so similar to mine. We're both Chinese American women with neuromuscular disabilities who grew up in the Midwest with masters in sociologies, PhD dropouts, cat lovers, food lovers. Representation is such an important thing for those of us who are part of marginalized groups. It is so important to be able to envision possibilities, to not feel alone in your struggles, and to know there are people like you in the world. It can be such an empowering thing. Her writing and her very larger than life presence makes me feel like I'm not alone, or the only one out there that feels a certain way or have certain experiences. The thing about Alice is that she's one of these unique leaders that do not see herself as a leader, but as a partner in the fight for justice. And I think that's what makes her such an amazing leader. She's there to amplify the voices of people with disabilities as our oracle. And I really love the ending to Letter to Asian American Disabled Women and Girls. Alice writes at the end, I appreciate the time and vulnerability it took for you to reach out to me. To keep it 100% honest with you, I'm not your role model, mentor, or friend. I'm prepared to be your peer, colleague, or fellow troublemaker in the future. Role models create unrealistic expectations and an asymmetrical power dynamic. Role models or icons can do more harm than good because they obscure the flaws and contradictions we all have. I've become increasingly uncomfortable over the years with the way people perceive me because it's a lot. I don't want the fear of disappointing others to influence my decisions because I'm accountable to myself first and foremost. Setting boundaries and being clear about my time and capacity are ways to protect myself, and I encourage you to do the same when you're ready. And I think I love this part. I think it's great advice. Yeah. Rahnee?
So rich, Grace, and this, for me, that part was very like satisfying. Like I felt like my cells, like the cells of my body, my heart cells, my lung cells, they were all getting so much from, like, I don't know, something good, just something really, really good from that letter. What resonated with for me though the most was the explanation that there's so many parts. I can't it's like to hierarchically identify the top one is kind of frustrating, but here we are. And so the top one for me had to do with the explanation of the calorie intake. And so like the whole process of coffee, peanut butter. I can't remember what the third item was, but it was like this, like the routine of food. And I like, even though now like I'm a fat person, but this is like something that it was not foreseen for me to be that like I had to constantly, like Alice describes in the book, throughout all sorts of areas, but particularly that part about the morning routine in terms of food, reminded me of the need for me to take in a lot of calories because my autoimmune diseases was burning up so much of my energy from the skin production, probably from the the joints being attacked by my immune system. I couldn't keep on any weight. And I was, so they would make me like eat, doctors would prescribe and nutritionists would prescribe. They thought maybe I was, had eating disorder. And so for years, I just had to be thoughtful about eating and what I would eat and have no holds barred on eating and things like that. And so just how she was able to describe that in a way that I found to be just beautiful, but not like sappy and pitiful, but just kind of just so real. I really appreciated that, and I love the descriptions on food making and the parts about the even that she got published, writing about rice soup. That's was I just love that because like I my doctor, my primary care physician, she's Thai too, and so she even used the term juk, which I was surprised because I guess that's more of a Chinese term more than Thai. But the idea that this whole this rice soup is kind of it's a thing, and it's really important that you make it right. I just gotta say, and I love that it was published and taken seriously. So that honestly resonated with me the most. But there's so much more, so much more.
Yeah, there's so much specificity and breadth in the book. There's so many ways in for all of us into the book, and ways that we each feel seen by its almost prismatic mirrors, windows, doors. For me, one of the things that stood out was rage. She talks a lot about rage, and uses the metaphor of the fighting spirit of the tiger to describe how rage can be a productive tool for change, which makes me curious, what does rage mean to you? And how do you unleash your big cat energy, as Alice Wong says?
That's a great question. Am I on mute? Oh no, I'm not on mute. When I was younger, I think I had this idealistic view of the world, that people could just join hands and change the world. And well, I'm not saying that people can't come together and create positive change by trying to remain in harmony. If I didn't believe that at some level, I wouldn't even try. But I think as I've gotten older, I realized that you have to channel your anger as well. And that rage can be very effective and drive me. If you don't care enough about an issue, that it drives you to become enraged, and it's not important enough to fight for. My mother always tells me to calm down and often asking why I'm so angry all the time. And I always tell her it's because I'm upset and I'm angry because I care, and that things are just so unjust for so many of us in society. I think that rage can drive society to enact real change. I always think of that saying, if you are not angry, you're not paying attention. So that's how I feel. About you, Rahnee?
Absolutely. I love that. If you're not paying attention, if you're not angry. And I do remember from Ed Roberts, who was part of, like, he actually was like a director of an agency like I'm running now, but back in the 70s. And in fact, the he ran the agency after they had told him that he couldn't go to school. So it was like really radical. And so Ed Roberts said too that anger is like the crippled fist in the air. It was a way for us to energize ourselves to make a difference. And I took that very seriously when I with the whole connection to to civil disobedience and protesting and setting up and using direct action as a way to make changes for people with disabilities when it came to increased home and community-based services, and at least equitable home and community-based services as compared to institutions. And I'll have to say that the manner that I unleash it is, can be kind of traditional. I get red in the face. I get people notice I get kind of squiggly, itchy in my seat, and I get a little snappy. I though also kind of narrow my eyes, and I get strategic about like what are the ways that the solution can be made. And so it's also about strategizing with like big systems, different parts that can influence change, and trying to get them to say yes to the necessary changes. And historically, I also have been like calmly arrested. So unless somebody wasn't going to like say yes to a policy change at a protest, I'm not leaving, and the police are going to have to drag me out of the space, or write a ticket, and and then I show up at court. So those are some ways that I have unleash my big cat energy. But being in the role that I have now, I've have to rely on Grace, like your outrage or overt ways of being at rallies and things like that. And my outrage, I have to express it in rational thought, policy, data, dollars. And so it is part of, that what they call the 5-point strategy of making social change, is people on the streets, media, administrative rule changes, courts, and then direct action. So, or people in the streets is probably the same. I probably say that twice because I like it so much, but it's all of that together is what makes something change, and all of it I think is outrage with things that are not okay.
Totally. I think both of you are like illustrating just the diversity of tactics, the ways that each of us can play our own sort of like role and have a place together in making change and responding in our own anger collectively. And that collective part is really, that's something I want to interrogate a little bit more with you. Alice Wong talks a lot in the book about the power of living and loving relationships with family and community, or creative collaborators or access workers too. That's also important in her life and in her activism. So I would love to speak into the room a little bit more about the relationships around your activism. And also, if you're willing to share, would you be willing to share how you know each other as well, and about your own relationship as panelists?
Yeah, thanks, Noah. I think there's just so many friends in the disability activism community that are important to me, Rahnee and Alice included. There's nothing like being around people in this community. I feel like I can be myself around them, especially with the disabled activists of color in particular. Rahnee and I first met over 16 years ago. Oh my God, I can't believe it's been so long. At Access Living, a center for independent living in Chicago that she was working at. Her friend and coworker was a mutual friend of ours, and I went to college with her, and she was also a past PCA of mine. She is also Asian American and a sign language interpreter. She thought Rahnee and I had many things in common and we hit it off. And she was right. We have been friends ever since. Rahnee is the best, and I've learned so much from her throughout the years. Rahnee actually started this informal group of disabled Asian American women a few years back, and we get together to mostly eat and chat, and we haven't done this in recent years because of the pandemic, but I really hope that we can resume again soon. Also for me, my spouse, Armando, we've been together over 13 and a half years now, but he's not just my partner in life, but in advocacy and activism. He's a Mexican immigrant, and it's been wonderful learning and experiencing each other's cultures throughout the years, and as well as recognizing similarities in our cultures. We care about each other's causes and shared causes, and we've always attended rallies, protests, events together, from disability, healthcare, immigration, anti-racism, Black Lives Matters, and so many others. We have participated in some of women's marches together. We have volunteered together. If there's a cause that I care about or he does, we will alert one another to contact our Congress people or other government leaders. We're generally on the same page regarding issues. We both believe that oppression is linked and that we should care about all causes that affect disabled, BIPOC, LGBTQ+, women, and other marginalized groups. And I feel like I'm really lucky to have a partner like him who understands and cares about these things. How about you, Rahnee?
Well, I'm so happy that you mentioned Armando, because I just love your relationship, and like I have this, one of my favorite pictures is you in a group with you and Armando together, but then there's other group, like Jay Jin and things like that, going downtown Chicago with a rally and some protest signs and things like that. And guys, I just love your relationship so much. I love you both very much too. So yeah, you totally nailed it about how we met up and how we stuck together. And I admire you so much. Like, you are able to put pen to paper about what it means to be disabled Asian women, like in your work around sexuality and disability was groundbreaking, and something that I think even today is like still like a shocker for everybody. And so I have such mutual respect for you, Grace, and your family, like your brother's talent is amazing, and just that you are doing so much for your own family too, as you talked about at the earlier on today. So that's what I really love, and I love that you never have given up, like this idea about fashion and disability, like in that I think that from being from Thailand, I love that you were also part from like Southeast Asia, even though you're Chinese descent. That there is though something about Southeast Asia that I think often can get overlooked by the other Asian countries. And I really love that about that kind of relationship that we share in terms of that geographic connection, even though we're in the here in the United States, right? That idea about being connected to other parts of the world that many people here in, like Alice pointed out, on the stolen land, don't really quite understand, and seem like they don't even like take it into account when they're thinking about what is possible, what needs to be considered for future plans and current plans. So I feel very like seen by you. And my relationships to activism, like my husband, I met him because my boss at the time, back in the 90s, so this was pre-Chicago, was scouting out a location to protest, and I was outside. So I can't remember what the street is, but Mike will remember. But it's right by, well, is it Wells? No, it's Wabash, and I think it's Madison, Wabash and Madison. My boss was upstairs in a building trying to find a protest location. And then this guy in a wheelchair comes around the corner, and I got excited because I'm from a small area. So I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a disabled person. I must know them. And it wasn't somebody that I knew, but then my boss came down and was like, oh, this is Mike Ervin. You need to meet them. And here I am now, married many years. And so this idea of, it's very similar to what you described, like you just don't have to explain things because our perspective is impacted by what we need on a day-to-day, which is just simple equity and access to everyday life. So Mike is a night owl, just like Alice, and Alice like writes very, very strongly and very well about, if I want to stay up till 4 a.m., I should be able to stay up till 4 a.m. In an institution, you don't have that kind of decision making. And for me as a spouse, like I wish Mike would not go to sleep at 4 a.m. because I don't want to be woken up when he goes to bed with his PA putting him in bed at that time. But that's his right, And so that's what I have in terms of relationships to activism is, sexual relationships, but then there's also relationships that we have, Grace, between, women to women, to other disabled people, that you get to see other disabled people doing things that people told you that you weren't able to do, or even you told yourself that you wouldn't be able to do, and they're doing them. And then you realize that that image gives you a path forward for your own life. So I remember at my first protest in 1996 in Atlanta, they always had a party at the end of the protest week. And the late Larry Biondi, who's in the who lived in Evanston. He used to work at Progress Center for many years. He used a wheelchair, and he was like dancing in his wheelchair. He was like just wiggling and really dancing and having a good time. And I just looked at him because ever since my arthritis started, I just never felt like I could dance. And there he was, like having a blast dancing. And it's that kind of possibility and connection that that happened because of a protest that week, that makes a huge impact for me.
I wanted to say, Rahnee, that you and Mike are like the ultimate disabled power couple, and just the way that you support each other in everything is just it's just something to look up to, and the way that the mutual respect that you have for each other, and just love you both so much, and so happy that you're both in our lives. But yeah, I definitely know what you're saying. I feel like I've met some friends at protests too. It's nice to people think of it, it's just nice to be around a group of, sometimes you think you're the only one that thinks the way that you do. And then it's just nice to be around people that just get you, and you're definitely a person that I feel that way about. So
Y'all are such a power of friendship. I am new to knowing both of you, and hope to get to know you more, and become friends with you, because I love what you're all saying about the intimacy that comes from equity work together, from sharing food and fashion and writing together. And yeah, I think we're gonna shift to Q&A in a second. So this will be my last question. Yeah, Alice Wong describes herself as a crip oracle and truth bombs a lot of activist wisdoms throughout the book, and specifically highlights the creativity and the wisdom that disabled people hold and share with the world. So I was wondering if you could each leave us, as we move to the Q&A, with any additional advice, any crip wisdom of your own.
okay, I guess I'll start. I think for me, I think Alice has taught me that you can be an advocate wherever you are, even in your own home. As my disability continues to progress, and I cannot always do things in person, this is so important to realize. We grow up with the idea that things can only be done one way, and it's not true. The pandemic taught us this, and I think this is what Alice always teaches us. Her recent pieces discussing her recent health issues on her disability visibility project website, and her pieces about her new relationship with food and eater, and adapting to her new method of communication in KQED are such important pieces. I think it teaches us the power of change and adaptation, and how people are resilient and can channel perceived negatives and challenges into something positive, and that life is worth living and fighting for. It challenges the perceptions that people have about what it is to experience joy and pain, what it means to be human and whole. I think of these things every day now, as my own body continues to change, and with each passing year, the loss in certain functions for myself. But I adapt and I relearn, and to realize that there's something wrong with us as disabled and chronically ill people. It is the structural and systemic barriers that prevent us from having full lives. And if we could have all the resources we need, what a different world it could be. The fact is, society deems some people more important than others. And if we could just see that people have inherent worth and value just because they're human and deserve basic human rights, wow, what a concept. That if we could just build an equitable world, not just for disabled people, but for all people, I think we would all benefit from this. It seems like a tall order that seems unattainable, but no matter how difficult, I just think we need to continue to try.